Hi, this is NextGen Picks. Somewhere in America right now, somebody is mounting a 75-inch TV above a fireplace in a 10x12 living room. And 6 months from now, they're going to be sitting on their couch with a stiff neck, watching their own reflection in the screen, wondering why the $800 OLED looks worse than the cheaper TV it replaced. That's not a horror story. That's the most common buyer's remorse pattern in the entire 75-inch category. Before you click buy, I want to walk you through the 5 warning signs your room is going to wreck this purchase. And quick favor before we get into it. If you find this useful, the subscribe NextGen Picks button helps me keep doing independent analysis instead of paid product placements. That's it. No long pitch. Now, the 75-inch TV is a brilliant piece of hardware in the right room. The problem is that right room has very specific physics requirements, and every owner thread, every long-term review pattern, every repair shop breakdown of return panels points to the same 5 mismatches. Most buyers find out about them after the return window closes. My read is, you don't have to be one of them. Zoom out for a second. The 75-inch TV used to be a flex. 6 years ago, you were dropping $3,000 minimum to get into one. Now, walk into any Costco on a Saturday, and High-Ends will sell you a 75 in U6 for $549. TCL's Q6 lands somewhere around $629 to $749, depending on the week. Samsung's Q60D series sits just under $1,000. The price floor on this category collapsed, and the entire industry quietly built its 2024 and 2025 marketing strategy around pushing buyers up from 65 to 75. Look, I get the pull. When the price difference between a 65-inch and a 75-inch panel is $200, the math feels obvious. Why wouldn't you go bigger? That's the exact question every salesperson on the floor is trained to lean into. They never stop you and ask, hey, what does your living room actually look like? They just point at the larger rectangle and let your dopamine handle the rest. Here's what's actually happening. Big box showrooms average around 18,000 square FT. The TV section alone runs 40 to 60 feet long with 7-foot ceilings minimum. In that environment, a 75-inch panel looks medium-sized, reasonable, manageable. Then it shows up at your house in a living room that's maybe 180 square FT with 80 ceilings, and suddenly you're looking at a 512 FT wide rectangle that dominates the entire wall. The funny part is that disorientation isn't your fault. It's a known retail effect. Showroom scale distortion has been documented in retail psychology research going back to the plasma era. Same reason cars look smaller on a dealer lot than in your driveway. But I'm getting sidetracked. Back to TVs. So let's get to the actual problem. 5 warning signs. Each one is something the long-term owner threads keep flagging across Reddit's, our 4K TV, AVS forum, and the consumer review aggregators. Each one is something you can check before you spend $1. Number 1 is the one almost everyone gets wrong, and it isn't screen size itself. It's the gap between your couch and the wall. Warning sign 1, the distance problem. Here's the math, and it's brutal. THEX, the cinema certification body, the people who literally invented the modern home theater spec, recommends a 36-degree field of view for cinematic immersion. SMTE, the Broadcasting Standards Organization, calls for 30 degree. For a 75-inch panel, the X number puts your ideal viewing distance at 8.4 FT. SMTE pushes that closer to 912 FT. Now, go measure your couch. The average American living room runs about 14 by 16 FT. Once you subtract the furniture pulled away from the wall, couch back, console depth, foot traffic clearance, the actual eye-to-screen distance lands somewhere between 7 and 9 FT. 9 out of 10 times, that buyer is sitting at 712 FT. That's a full foot under the minimum, 2 feet under SMTE, and the panel is going to feel like it's about to fall on them. The part nobody talks about, and this surfaces over and over in long-term owner threads on AVS Forum, is something one display engineer described as retinal reprogramming. Sounds like jargon. It isn't. What it actually means is your visual cortex has to relearn how to scan a screen that's larger than your central focus area. Owner reports use specific language. Felt cars sick the first week, didn't know where to look, had to consciously move my eyes to track the picture. That's not a software setting. That's your nervous system telling you the geometry is wrong. To be fair, and the data backs this up, some people do adapt. The forum threads consistently show roughly 2/3 of close buyers report adjusting within 4 to 8 weeks. The other third, they live with low-grade visual discomfort for the entire ownership period and trade out at the next upgrade cycle. That's a 1 in 3 regret rate on the most expensive TV most people will ever buy. That number genuinely bothers me. Okay, here's where I'm going to lose half of you. If your couch sits under 9ft from the TV wall, my honest read is a 65-in OLED will give you a better viewing experience than any 75-in QLED. Regardless of price, regardless of brand, regardless of how good the larger panel reviews, the geometry beats the technology. Every time. If you bought a 75 at 8ft and you're loving it, drop it in the comments. I want to know if you broke the pattern or you're just powering through. And here's the part that genuinely frustrates me about how this category gets reviewed. Most YouTube TV reviews are filmed in dedicated studio spaces. 12 to 15 ft of viewing distance, controlled tungsten lighting, calibrated panels, blackout walls behind the camera. So the reviewer says it looks incredible because in their environment it does. They're not lying. They're just not standing in your living room. The geometry that works at 14 ft does not translate to 8ft. And the bigger the screen, the worse that translation gets. The math nobody runs at the showroom. A 75-in panel measures roughly 37 in tall. At 7ft of viewing distance, the screen height is more than 40% of the distance from your eyes to the wall. You are physically inside the immersion zone past it. Actually, that's commercial home theater territory where dedicated rooms get designed around blackout walls, acoustic panels, and seating spaced specifically for that immersion. Your living room with the kids' homework on the floor and the kitchen visible through the archway. It wasn't built for it. The pre-purchase test that actually works. Cut a piece of cardboard 66 in wide by 37/12 in tall. That's the actual panel footprint, not the diagonal marketing number. Tape it to your wall in the exact mounting position. Sit on your couch in your normal viewing posture. Watch a full movie on your current TV with that cardboard rectangle in your peripheral vision. If your eyes start feeling tired, if you keep glancing at the cardboard outline because it's just there, that's your answer. 65 in is your size. Save the $750 and put it toward a better panel technology. Mini LED, OLED, whatever fits your lighting situation. Quick interruption. I'm putting together a follow-up on this, specifically the difference between 65 in OLED and 75 in mini LED at typical American living room distances. If you have a specific room layout you want me to walk through. Bonus living room over a garage, narrow Brooklyn apartment, fireplace mounted disaster basement movie room. Drop the dimensions in the comments. I'll work the most common ones into the next breakdown. Now, distance is sign number 1 because it's the foundation. Get it wrong, and the other 4 warning signs don't even matter. You've already mismatched the panel to the room. But if you cleared the distance test, you're not safe yet because the next 4 are where most I did everything, right, buyers? Still get blindsided. Lighting, room geometry, content quality, mount height. Each one of these failure modes shows up in repair shop returns, in long-term thread reread cycles, and in the resell listings on Marketplace where the description always reads, barely used, just too big for our space. Almost word for word, always within the 18 months of ownership, and this is where it gets uncomfortable. The Marketplace pattern on this category, when you start scrolling through it, it's genuinely sad. People list at $450 when they paid $850. They write moving or downsizing in the description, but scroll through and the language repeats. Too big for our space. Decided to go smaller. Wife wanted a smaller TV. It isn't really a moving issue. It's a sizing mistake issue dressed up to preserve the seller's pride. I keep coming back to this one because the financial damage is so quiet. Nobody talks about it. The TV gets sold at a 40% loss. The buyer pretends they wanted a change, and the Next person in line, the buyer of the discounted 75-in, often makes the same mistake 6 months later. The category cycles through these moves constantly, which brings us to warning sign number 2, and it's the one that decides whether your panel performs at all during the hours you actually watch TV: lighting, specifically direct sun, side window glare, and how your panel choice interacts with both. Lighting is where the panel tech religious wars start, and honestly, more than half the buyers who get the sizing right still end up unhappy because they bought the wrong panel for the room's actual lighting reality. There are basically 3 lighting situations a 75-in panel has to survive: direct sun on the screen during peak viewing hours, bright ambient light without direct hits, but with high overall room luminance, and dim or controlled light viewing, which is the rare situation in American homes. Most owner threads on this point break almost cleanly along that fault line. The OMD, owners who love their panels are universally watching in dim or controlled light rooms. The OLED owners with regret are almost always describing south-facing or west-facing windows that hit the panel during evening news, weekend football, or whenever the family actually watches. Get this wrong, and the $1,800 OLED becomes a glossy mirror with a TV trapped inside of it. Let's break down what to actually look for. Warning sign 2, windows that aren't behind your seating. The simple version, any window in your viewing room that the TV can see is a problem. Not just the ones in front of the panel, side windows count too. Sometimes worse, because the angle of incidence puts the reflection right in your central viewing zone. Here's what's actually happening with the panel physics. OLED panels. The LG C5, Sony Bravia Bait OLED, Samsung S90F use a pixel-level emissive structure with a glossy front filter that maximizes contrast in dark rooms. That same filter acts like a high-quality mirror in bright rooms. Real-world peak brightness on a 2025 OLED runs around 800 to 200 nits in HDR highlights, but sustained full-screen brightness for daytime SDR content sits closer to 250 to 400 nits. That's not enough to fight a sunlit room. A QLED with mini LED backlighting, Samsung QN90F, Hisense U8QG, TCL QM8K runs full-screen sustained brightness up around 800 to 500 nits. That's the panel that wins every daytime scenario. The trade-off is contrast in dark rooms where the OLED pulls ahead by a wide margin. To be fair, the matte finish panels, Samsung's Frame Series, and the S95 FO OLED with the new anti-glare coating handle reflections meaningfully better, but the matte coating slightly diffuses fine detail, which OLED purists hate. There's no free lunch in this category. Repair shop breakdowns on this point keep landing on the same culprit. Buyers returning OLEDs within 90 days because they look dim, and the units test perfectly. The unit isn't broken. The room is broken for that panel. Warning sign 3. Your room is 12 ft wide and the TV goes on the long wall. This one nobody catches at the showroom because the geometry doesn't show up until the panel is installed. A 75-in TV measures 66 in wide. Add the manufacturer's recommended 4 to 6 in of buffer on each side for ventilation and visual breathing. Now you need a clear wall span of about 75 to 78 in. Call it 1 to 2 ft of uninterrupted wall. In a 12 ft wide room, that span exists technically, but the visual proportion is off. The TV becomes the room. Every sightline from the kitchen, the hallway, the dining area in an open floor plan funnels straight to the screen. Walk in, you see the TV. Sit at the dinner table, you see the TV. Try to have a conversation in the seating area, you see the TV, whether it's on or off. The part nobody talks about in spec sheet reviews is the negative space requirement. Interior designers working on media rooms target a screen-to-wall ratio of roughly 25 to 35% of the wall's visible area. A 75-in panel on a 12 ft wall in an 8 ft ceiling room hits about 45%. That's the threshold where the room stops being a living room with a TV in it and starts being a TV with a room around it. The 75-in is a fundamentally long wall product for 15x20 ft rooms minimum. Below that, the 65-in is the correct call. And again, save the money for a better panel technology. Here's the take that's going to get me hate mail. If your room gets any direct sunlight during the hours you actually watch TV, an OLED at 75 in is the wrong purchase. Period. End of conversation. The OLED community will tell you to use blackout curtains. That's not a fix. That's surrendering your living room. A 2000 net mini LED for half the price will give you a better real-world experience 9 out of 10 days. Half of you are already typing. I'll see you in the comments. Warning sign 4. Most of what you watch is 108p or worse, and you're feeding it to an 8.3 million pixel screen. Cable TV broadcasts in the US range from 720p to 1080i. Default tier streaming on most services delivers 108p or below. Netflix's standard tier, Hulu's base plan, default YouTube playback, the majority of live sports streams. To get true 4K, you need either a 4K Blu-ray, the top streaming tier on Netflix or Disney+, or 4K native gaming. That's the entire 4K content universe. A 75-in 4K panel has roughly 8.3 million pixels. When you feed it 108p, which is 2.07 million pixels, the TV has to upscale by a factor of 4. Every manufacturer claims their AI upscaler is the best. The reality from independent panel reviews, upscaling quality varies across brands, but at this screen size, even great upscaling reveals every encoding flaw in the source. Compression artifacts that disappear at 55 and become loud at 75. The funny part is, this often makes a 75-in panel look worse than the smaller TV it replaced, at least when watching cable, network broadcasts, daytime TV, or sports on basic streaming. The buyer assumes the TV is broken. It isn't. The content pipeline can't fill the panel. My read is, this is the most overlooked warning sign on the list. Buyers obsess over panel specs. They ignore content, and they're shocked 6 months in when their main use case, the cable news, the network shows, the kids streaming on default quality, looks fuzzier or shimmery in ways the previous TV never did. If most of your viewing is sub 4K, drop to 65 in and put the savings into a better panel. Now here's where it gets weird. There's a hidden trade-off buried inside this whole category that almost nobody mentions. Panel uniformity gets worse as size scales up. The bigger the LCD, the harder it is to maintain uniform backlight distribution across the entire surface. That's why tear-round reports from places like AVS Forum, HDTV Test, and the panel testing community consistently flag uniformity issues on entry-level 75-in QLEDs, vignettation in the corners, dirty screen effect on slow camera pans, banding in low-gray scenes. 65-in panels at the same price point usually have noticeably better uniformity. Same brand, same panel technology, smaller screen, fewer manufacturing defects per unit area. The data backs this up. Return rates on entry-level 75-in QLEDs run measurably higher than the same model in 65 in specifically for uniformity complaints. Remember what I said earlier about the cardboard test? This is where it connects. The reason that test works isn't just about psychological adjustment. It's also a forcing function on whether you actually need the larger size. Given that you're statistically more likely to get a worse panel in 75 in than in 65 at the same price. I almost didn't include this next part, but it actually matters more than I expected. The QC variance on 75in panels in the budget tier, TCL, Insignia, Vizio at this size, runs higher than at 65. The panel lottery is real. Long-term threads on Reddit's R4K TV consistently flag uneven backlight bleed, occasional dead pixel clusters, and the dreaded scrolling band, a visual artifact where slow camera pans show subtle horizontal banding. These issues exist in all sizes but become more visible at 75 because the panel surface is larger and harder to manufacture uniformly. Which brings us to warning sign number 5. And this is the one that survives every other check. You can have perfect distance, perfect lighting, perfect room geometry, perfect content, and you can still wreck the entire purchase by mounting the screen wrong. Specifically, mounting it too high. That's where this all comes together. Warning sign 5, mounting above the fireplace. The standard fireplace mantle sits 54 in off the floor. mount a 75-in panel above it, and the screen center now lands at roughly 70 and 15 plus in above seated eye level. Your neck is in mild upward extension every viewing session. 2 hours. A night, 450 hours a year, the cervical strain compounds. You know who notices first? Not the buyer. Their physical therapist 6 months in. Long-term ownership threads call this out constantly. Buyers blame the couch, their pillow, their posture, their age. The TV placement is almost never the first suspect and almost always the actual cause. A tilting wall mount helps for moderate height mismatches. Above a fireplace, the geometry is usually too extreme for tilt to fully fix. Either lower the mount or buy smaller and skip the fire placement entirely. So, who is the 75-in actually for? 3 buyer profiles emerge from the long-term data. Profile 1, the 75-in is genuinely right for you. Open concept living room, 15x 20 ft minimum, viewing distance between 912 and 12 ft, mostly 4K source content, controlled lighting, or a mini LED panel for sun-heavy rooms, and eye-level mounting between 42 and 48 in from the floor. If you check all 5 boxes, this is your size. Buy with confidence. Profile 2, you should be looking at 65 in living room under 14 feet wide. Viewing distance under 9 ft, mixed content with cable or basic streaming, sun-drenched windows the panel will see, or a fireplace mount-only option. Drop down. Put the saved money into OLED or premium mini LED. Profile 3, the edge case. You hit some criteria, miss others. My read is, when you're on the line, 65 in with better panel tech beats 75 in with worse panel tech every single time. The part nobody talks about is that going bigger only pays off when every other variable is right. Otherwise, you're paying more for a worse experience. For the room that genuinely supports a 75-in panel, the open plan 9 to 11 ft distance, controlled lighting setup. My pick for best overall is the Samsung QN90F, or the Hisense U8QG, both mini LED, both bright enough for any sun, both around $1,800 to $2,200 depending on the retailer and the week. For the compromised room, the under 4T wide sun hit cable heavy. Fireplace mounted reality. Best value is the LG C5 OLED in 65 in at $1,400 to $2,600. Smaller panel, genuinely better experience, and you keep $500 for a soundbar. Now the final debate, same budget, $1,500. You can buy a 65 in C5 OLED, or you can buy a 75 in U8QG mini LED. The OLED is the better panel. The mini LED is the bigger panel. In a perfectly designed room, the bigger panel wins on immersion. In a normal American living room with windows and cable and a couch 8 feet from the wall, my call is the OLED takes it. Vote in the comments. 65 in better tech or 75 in bigger screen. Honestly curious where you all land. To be fair, both panels are genuinely good products. There's no wrong answer in the abstract. The wrong answer is the one that doesn't match your room. And this is where it gets uncomfortable for the industry. The whole 75 in push in 2025. The aggressive sub-1,000 pricing, the showroom positioning, the doorbuster sales exist because manufacturers figured out that buyers regret going smaller more publicly than they regret going bigger. Going small feels like a downgrade. Going big feels like a flex. So buyers default to bigger even when bigger is wrong for them. I keep coming back to this one. The category margins on entry-level 75-in panels are razor thin. Manufacturers are barely making money on the units themselves. The play is upselling you on the soundbar, the wall mount, the extended warranty, and the brand ecosystem you'll be locked into for the next replacement cycle, which, by the way, is shorter than ever. The average TV lifespan dropped from 12 years a decade ago to about 7 now. Anyway, the TV is the loss leader. The room mismatch is your problem to live with. 5 warning signs aren't a checklist for whether 75 in is a good size. 75 is phenomenal for the right room. The signs are diagnostic tests for whether your specific room can carry that size without compromise. Distance, lighting, geometry, content, mount height, 5 filters. If all 5 clear, you're going to be thrilled. If 2 or 3 fail, the panel will technically work, but the experience will erode over time. And that erosion is the part you can't undo without selling at a 40% loss and starting over. The buyers I see succeed long-term don't optimize for biggest. They optimize for fit. Match the panel to the room. The room always wins. Look, buy the 75 in if your room can hold it. No shame in going big when the geometry checks out. The cardboard test from earlier is the cheapest insurance you'll find. $8 at any hardware store. If that outline feels right after a full movie, you're cleared. If it feels too big, it is too big. Trust your eyes, not the salesperson. If this saved you a bad purchase, hit subscribe NextGen Picks so I can keep doing this.